Amazing. And I'll do our introduction, and shortly after I'll pass the baton over to Stephanie, and we'll get started. But yeah, once again, I want to thank everybody for being here today. The workshop that you're attending is called Retaining Girls in Sport and Recreation and Physical Activity. Your facilitator today is Stephanie Knickel. I'm sure some of you actually heard her speak the other day on CBC, which is very exciting. And I heard that you got a lot of snow today. So I think that bodes well for us as a virtual delivery. It means you're not out in the community doing other things, and maybe this is your time is protected and gets to be spent with us. But for anybody who has to do some extra shoveling today, my heart goes out to you. So before we get started, I'd first like for us to take a moment to connect with the land that we're currently on. We're fortunate enough to be gathering from many different territories, as mentioned, with us connecting virtually. And I want to recognize the original occupants of the place where we reside, and respect to Indigenous people's beliefs and connections to the land. This is especially because those beliefs have been restricted for so long. Since I'm coming to you from Toronto, Ontario, I'd like to acknowledge that I'm meeting on the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat people. And this area is home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. I'd also like to acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit. Finally, it is to our dismay then, and I'd like to acknowledge that underrepresentation of Indigenous women and girls in sport in this country, and the multiple barriers that they face participation at all levels. And at Canadian Women in Sport, it's our intention to build relationships that will allow us to better address this gap through our work. Now looking at my slide, this is a really fantastic map that I pulled from nativeland.ca. If you're not familiar with that resource, check it out. The website is packed with information, and you can also, do searches with area codes to find out more about the original occupants of where you are. So highly recommend you check that out when you have the opportunity. So a bit about this workshop and some of the work that CPRA is doing to increase the retention of girls in recreation across Canada. In 2018, as you may know, the Government of Canada announced the target to achieve gender equity by 2035. So this project, these workshops that are being led across Canada are intended to build capacity in you as program deliverers or designers or administrators in rec sport in Canada for gender equity and retention. As we know that women and girls are not a homogenous group, there's a couple of target populations mentioned here. So girls 9 to 15, which will be covered in this workshop, new mothers, women age 55 plus, and girls and women with intersecting identities. Again, that will be, that'll come through in this workshop as well as a key theme and key consideration. So as mentioned, along with these workshops, some of the other deliverables from this project for CPRA is a toolkit for designing spaces, these virtual workshops, 2 annual webinars, the scale up of the High Five program, which is well in progress, and then the community grant, which closed in mid-December of 2020, and the recipients of that funding were announced at the end of January. So if anybody here was a recipient, feel free to shout yourself out in the chat. I would love to hear about that. So the content and the workshop you're going to participate in today, it really touches on 4 of the goals from the Framework for Recreation. That's goals 1, 2, 4, and 5. With Goal 1, we're going to be touching on fostering active living through physical recreation. Goal 2 will be all about increasing inclusion and access to recreation for populations that face constraints or barriers to that participation. Then we jump to 4, so supportive environments. This plays a really key role in engaging girls and retaining girls in sport and recreation. And then lastly, recreation capacity. So again, growing the rec space by having people such as yourselves attend this training and learn how to implement this foundational knowledge. A little bit on Canadian women in sport. Oops, cancel. Instead of admitting someone, I almost kicked them out. Okay. A little bit about women's sport before I pass the baton. We've been around for over 40 years, or actually this is our 40th year. We were formerly known as the Canadian Association for the Advancement of Women in Sport and Physical Activity, but as of February 2020, we're now Canadian Women in Sport. It's much more succinct. With the rebrand came our awesome new website. So if you haven't had the chance, I encourage you to check it out. It's full of tons of resources and a lot of resources that are drawn upon for the content you'll be learning today. And I'll plug those throughout. But really, you'll find a lot of info on gender equity, resources, and info on what other orgs are doing to implement policy that will keep women and girls in sport and grow that pipeline for female leadership in sport in Canada. So without further ado, I'm going to pass it over to Stephanie Knickel. She wears so many hats, but she leads programming. She is in sport administration at the University of PEI. She has a background in recreation at PEI. She is a mom to 2 athletes. I'm not doing her justice, but she lives and breathes this information, and she's going to bring a lot of color commentary to the knowledge and the application here. So we're really lucky to have her, and I will still be around. I'll be lurking in the back. If you run into any tech issues, please feel free to send me a message in the chat. But I'll be here and able to help you out with anything you need. So
thank you.
Over to you, Stephanie.
Okay, and am I audible? Is that the right? Yeah, very good. Well, welcome everyone. This is great, and of course, you know, you wake up on a snow day and you're like, oh, complete snow day, don't have to do anything. Wait, virtual workshop, no problem. No problem. So Vanessa, I will be throwing it back and forth to you every once in a while because I am not tech savvy. And as we go through some of these kind of group chats and breakout rooms and stuff, you're going to help me with that, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I'll be there.
All right. So everyone, I'm not sure even who is around on this online with us, but I'm sure I know a few people. So please feel free to shout out with a question at any time. And again, I'm on my phone, so unfortunately I can't see everything and who's there. So let's just take a look at the agenda. And I mean, this is actually new, the information, the actual PowerPoint and the information that was shared with me this last couple of months. You know, I had to really review it and get into it. And I actually personally learned a lot, you know, looking at the information initially and then trying to, what we're going to try to do is apply it to our communities and what's happening, you know, in our own environments and how we can actually try to come up with some achievable and you know, easy to fix, well, not easy to fix, but at least something that's going to be hard and fast and something that we can actually apply to make some positive changes for people. So welcome everyone again. We're going to set the context in where we are right now, maybe with respect to girls and women in physical activity and sport. We're going to look at the influential factors on what women and girls and kind of have or meet when they don't participate or don't continue on in sport, and that was actually an interesting eye-opener for me when I initially saw the information. And then there's those program considerations. So what can we do to actually make a difference to try to move past some of these barriers in our own community. So Vanessa, am I doing the PowerPoints? You're going for my, yeah, good. You're doing them. I love it. So can we move on to kind of getting to know one another? And, you know, I am Stephanie Knickel. My pronouns are she and her. And I'm actually originally from New Brunswick. I was born in St. John, lived there for a number of years, grew up a little bit in my elementary school years in Halifax. So I'm kind of a transplant. I actually came here in 1976, and I spent my youth and growing up here, and so that's where I'm from. So I would like to have everyone kind of introduce themselves. Is that where we're going with this, Vanessa?
Yeah, so we're actually a pretty big group today. We have 45 people on the call, which is amazing. What I'm going to direct you to do right now is to rename yourself. So if you have your video up, you can right click on your image and you should have the option to rename yourself. Alternatively, you can go into click participants at the bottom of the screen, find your name, and then again, right click yourself and rename. And the structure we have here is, you know, first name, you can include last name, your pronouns, you know, she, her, he, him, they, them, whatever that is to you, and then where you're from. So similarly, I'm a transplant to Toronto. I grew up in Ottawa and then moved here for university athletics and have stayed ever since. So if you're having any trouble renaming yourself, feel free to send me a message. If you're on an iPad or a tablet, it might look a little bit different, but that's the idea there.
Unfortunately, I can't see unless they, yes. It's great.
Yep, we have some people changing their names. Alternatively, you can put your info in the chat, which is great too. All right, why don't we move along?
Sure, absolutely. So we're moving into a poll here. And, you know, let's see where all of us kind of lie with our interests and how we became involved. I'm going to, so Vanessa, this is where they do this on their own? Yep. So I was going to share mine right now, but I think what I'll do is wait till everybody else. So what we're going to do is take a little minute to have your poll, put your answers in, and we'll meet back in like literally 30 seconds. How's that?
Perfect. I already see some people sharing. We're at about 50% of people having voted. So we can take 10 more seconds and see. I can share the results and we can discuss those.
I mean, I'd be interested in knowing the results. Okay.
Awesome. 80% of people having voted. I'm going to shut it down in 3, 2, 1. All right, that's great. We got 37 votes. I'll share the results now. So predominantly 76% of those who voted said family members. Then we have a couple votes each for professional athlete, community member, and educator.
Excellent. Good information. And it's actually exactly where I became heavily involved in sport and physical activity was following my older sister around. And my older sister was a very talented athlete. In fact, she was the firstborn and my dad was a very sporty guy. And so my older sister, Susan, always was playing soccer with the boys and soccer, football and hockey and all that sort of stuff. And I became kind of like, well, hey, you know, the attention's being put on Susan. I think I'm going to follow her around. In fact, you know, I started kind of doing things that she was doing, and she inspired me to become involved in sport and get better. She was always better than me, but anyway, she was a pretty talented athlete. So I think that's a lot for a lot of people, as the poll shows, that definitely a family member, whether it be a sibling or a parent, that would be the most positive influence, or, you know, how you become involved in sport and physical activity. So we've already kind of talked a little bit about the workshop objectives, but to specifically talk about them, it's really just to kind of talk about a little bit about the gender equity versus kind of equality, right? Gender equality in the context of sport and physical activity and youth development. And we're also going to understand what influences girls' participation, especially in the you know, that young adult and preteen years or teenage years. And then again, how we're going to try to kind of helps create some of those opportunities that are, and kind of work around some of those barriers by designing some different programs. So let's set the context. Let's talk about equality versus equity. And looking at the slide here, you know, equality is, you know, everyone gets the same opportunity. Everyone can, you know, start at the same starting line. They all get the same bike. They all, you know, whatever it is, that everybody gets the same resources. But unfortunately, it's not always the way it works in the world, and we need to look more at the equity part of things, where we need to take the people that are dealing with some of those barriers and give them more of the resources, or give them more of the opportunities, so that they have an equal chance or an equal opportunity to be successful. So really, you know, as the slide says, is that we just really want everyone to have, based on their own needs, how are they going to get to the finish line, right? Money and or, you know, resources that it may be with the equipment needed to participate in sport, or the ability to get to places if you're in a rural setting and don't have the opportunity to have local transportation, or your parents don't have to. So there's lots of different things we'll talk about as we get through the workshop here too. Let's move on to the next slide, which is what we call intersectionality. And this is kind of the combination of all of these factors that can contribute to the increased barriers that some of our female populations, women and female youth have. So intersectionality, and it's kind of a lot of information on the wheel here, and maybe sometime hard to read, but intersectionality is the interconnected nature of social categorizations that apply to an individual, kind of creating overlapping and interdependent systems of discrimination or disadvantage. So there's a lot of kind of more barriers for our Indigenous female youth than maybe per se another female youth that might be living in an urban setting. So a non-Indigenous female youth living in an Indigenous or in an urban setting, sorry. So I think probably really some of these factors and the numerous factors for some of these individuals, we need to really make sure that we understand, and how can we kind of move past them. So for long-term, everybody's heard, I think, of the long-term development program in sport and physical activity for multi-stage training. So for just this next slide, and it does touch on some of the barriers for girls and youth in sport, and young women's sport. And there are strategies for gender neutrality also versus considerations based on social differences. So I think kind of looking at the long-term development, is this fairly, what's the, Vanessa, I'm going to get you in here. What is the year that this is the most up-to-date long-term development? Do you know when this one came out?
There was one. 3.0 was released last year.
Just last year, right?
Yeah.
And the gender neutrality.
Okay, to the apex officer. Perfect.
What's that?
So with each year, there is an increase of that information and that focus, but the document as a whole predominantly focuses more on like fundamental movement skills and coaching from that perspective. And so we always are encouraging people to supplement that with the understanding of socialization, and the barriers that girls face to participation. And as you mentioned, girls with intersecting identities.
Right. Excellent. So shall we look at the current landscape? Where are we with regard to some of that participation level? So currently, what do you think? This is a poll, right?
Yes, this is a poll that we're going to do in the chat. So I want you to put your best answer in the chat.
So everyone can read that. The percentage of Canadian girls that are not participating in any type of sport or physical activity. And we can go now. Ooh. Oh, people are doing fairly well here on this one.
Yeah, haven't seen a 37 yet. And the rest
Didn't quite
is
get 37?
no, but that's okay. Thank you everybody for jumping in the chat. That's really great. The correct answer is 62%.
62.
Yeah.
Which is quite shocking. I actually got that wrong when I initially did my own poll, but it's actually, and then the age range there for Canadian girls would be, was it that 9 to 13?
This is actually 6 to 17.
So that entire group, 6 to 17. So it gives you an idea. So let's look at some of those intersecting factors that I was speaking of in that circle wheel initially. And you can see that depending on, where somebody lives and or their heritage or wherever it may be, that their parents live and how much they make, they are much more likely to participate. So looking through that chart, obviously you're more likely to participate. These girls are, if they are younger than 12 years old, they're able-bodied. They are either Caucasian, South Asian, or Asian and Black, and have any sexual orientation, but there are much more reduced numbers of participants if they are between the ages of 13 and 18. They have a disability, and they are Indigenous, and again, any sexual orientation. But the home and that time when people are growing up early, or that girls are growing up early, they are more likely to participate. Of course, if their parents have participated in sport, they have a greater income, and they are living either in an urban or rural setting. But the lack of participation may be because their parents did not participate in sport, and they have a lower income as well, and or they can live in an urban and rural setting. I wonder if this shocks anyone. It probably doesn't, but definitely those intersecting factors are lower income, Indigenous young females, and even those with disabilities, again, are at a much lower rate to participate than any of their other counterparts who have those non-barriers.
I'll jump in quickly to say that I've added a link to the chat from the Rally report. This came out in spring of 2020, and you'll find this table and more information on the current Canadian landscape and girls' participation there. So if you haven't read it, I would encourage you to. And just to clarify that here, when we say any sexual orientation, that is acknowledging that there is data missing in terms of gender expression and gender identity, because we know that trans youth face greater barriers to sport participation.
As I sip my coffee. Thank you, Vanessa, for throwing everything and anything you need to in as I get nervous here. So we're going to have another poll. So let's move on to the next slide and talk about what percentage of girls that have reported the quality of program was a barrier to their participation. So we do another chat poll. Let's see how everyone responds to this one. Yeah. Oh yeah, sorry, Vanessa, I saw that rally report. Next question. So everyone have a chance to put their answers in? Yeah, I think most of you probably got the correct answer. So definitely, it is unfortunately 43%. And that's kind of unfortunate. And if you think about quality programming versus, well, programming and coaching may go together, but so the survey responses that they've received for this quality of the sport includes the perception that the sport is not appropriately designed for girls, that quality coaching is needed, there aren't enough positive role models, and that girls have had poor overall initial experiences, and they found that maybe the sport may be too competitive. So those they've deemed as the quality of programming as the reason for, they don't think that the programming is quality. Anybody have anything to add in there in a chat and or other things that you have either heard or experienced from young female athletes that maybe is missing in this? Level of commitment, Lynn, yes. The level of commitment required. Anyone else? Definitely Molly. Hi, Molly. You're always good to bring
Hello.
that body image concerns. Definitely. Yeah, for sure. Anyone else want to contribute there? All right, burnout at a young age. Yes, Ruth. Hi, Ruth. Nice to see your name there. Less resources at the higher level. I think that's what it says, Mike. I'm not getting all the text. Good information. Resources as in the ability, pressure from family. Great, Dwayne. Those are good answers. Good additions to the additional ones, the other ones. Thanks, everybody. So let's move on to kind of those influential factors. Some of you may have just written those on, but also moving ahead into what really are some of the barriers for these girls and what are the influential factors. So let's move to the slide where we talk about this ecological model rather. So these four levels or four kind of pieces to the model are the intrapersonal factors, where that is their maybe their home life, their family influences. The interpersonal would be their school, their coach, their social environment. The environmental factors may be things such as not living as closely to an arena if they're playing hockey, and or the ability to get to a place, and then policy related factors, and policy may be things that have been just done the way they've always been done. They need to be let me just see here, Vanessa, let me see if there's anything else to hide. Sorry, I'm just looking through my notes here to make sure that I don't miss anything.
I did have someone share a great example as we were developing this workshop, and they brought in intersectionality with the socio-ecological model, and how, if you have that interpersonal support from your family to participate in recreation,
right,
but one family makes less than $50,000 a year annually, and another family makes more than $100,000 a year annually, and the rec program, so going to the policy level, the rec program in their community is no longer funded. Even if both families have the interpersonal support, the family that has more financial resources will be able to put their daughter, son, whoever in another program, whereas the family with less, that was their only opportunity. So just another example for context.
I knew you had that example in your, and I hadn't written it down. So can we have another chat with everybody here? And do you want to break out here, Vanessa?
I think we'll keep it going until we get to the table a few slides down. Yeah.
So, you know, we've gotten some of those experiences or some of those answers for top reasons for girls giving up sport or leaving sport. But I'd like people to, again, activity based. Let's see what you say. So what do you think of the top 4 reasons maybe that girls would give for leaving sport and recreation if they were currently involved and decided not to go back? Let's do that one first. Chat room. Chat room. They come in groups. And bullying, not having any fun. Yep. Oh, those are great. The passion died. It's great, Dwayne. Less and less friends are involved. Yeah. Great job. Injury. Friends aren't there. There's a theme, isn't there? Not as fun. Yeah. Feelings of exclusion. Right. Great answers, everyone. Great answers. So it seemed to be definitely a theme there, and other interests, right, which conflict. So as you know, there's a theme of friendship and belonging and wanting to be included, and we'll take a little closer look at that in a minute. So what are some of the reasons that girls would continue to stay in sport? Continuing. It is fun. It should be fun, Lynn Ann. Excellent. Motivation. Friends. Release stress. Great, Julian. Yep. Social interactions. Fun with friends. Great, Corey. Leaving because they don't. I can't see everybody's answer in my phone. Those are good.
As I'm seeing these come in, I'm realizing these are all of the things that I'm missing these days without sport.
Right. Right. Those are great answers, everyone. So obviously, kind of the opposite from, you know, why people would leave. So let's kind of compare what you've said to these top reasons why girls leave it and still stay in. So limiting girls and young women's experiences, there's certainly time commitment. Somebody said that initially was the very first answer, is that there's too much time. I know that you become more and more competitive in a sport, whether it be an individual sport or a team sport. You know, the practice time and the commitment increases. The financial barriers, as Vanessa mentioned too, like the more times you need to rent ice or participate in practice at the gym, it costs. And so especially if a family has more than, you know, 1 or 2 or several children in sport, injuries are big. I have found that, you know, even where I am at the university and certainly with university level athletes, I've actually seen younger and younger athletes in junior high and high school become more injured more frequently as well. And I'm sure there's a lot more study and research on the reasons why, but certainly if you're injured, you can't participate, and then there's no more fun, right? So this is the big thing. There's a lot of people that just mentioned fun being a big part of it for girls and for young females. So
I would add to just for the financial barriers, because recreation does offer a lot of free programming, which is absolutely phenomenal, but you can still lose participants because in combination with time commitments, maybe the program isn't the financial barrier, but they have to spend their time earning money through part-time work to start saving money for school or maybe contributing to their household.
Right. Thank you. Thank you. So enhancing young girls or young athletes and female athletes and experiences in either sport or physical activity. And I kind of stress this is not just about sport, because I see it as a fitness person. I see it in gyms, and I see it in fitness classes, and I see it in a variety of other capacities that young women aren't generally, if they're not into team sports or individual sports, they're not as interested or less likely to participate as well in physical activity. But certainly enhancing our young female athletes to continue to be active, stay in sport and stay physically active, are positive group dynamics. And Molly, you mentioned it, just inclusion, right? That being part of and I hate to say the word clique, but it is kind of that an important part for young female athletes or young female participants in any. And I always think of gym class and who got picked, last for the dodgeball teams and that sort of thing. And you go back to your, so people that maybe are less likely to be considered as part of your social circle are probably less likely they might not continue to participate. And actually really focus on trying hard. If young females are encouraged and they're successfully rewarded about, hey, you've tried hard, it's all we really would like, and coaches and or other mentors are focusing on that positive reinforcement for trying hard, females will tend to increase and stay in physical activity and sport a little longer. And positive coaching. From Martha, I can't read that entire thing, Martha. I think we underestimate what did that?
Importance of social connection.
Absolutely. Definitely. And this is, again, coming from a little bit more of the research and the girls themselves saying that too. So those are a little, anybody else have anything to add on kind of that, what else would enhance young female participation or continued
Stephanie, it's
participation?
Linan.
Hi, Linan.
Hi. What I hear, from our own household and so many of my friends, is just the expectation to keep increasing the commitment. So, like, you're 7 and you're expected to play A-level hockey 3 to 4 times a week, or figure skate 3 times a week.
Yeah.
And I just think we're like over focusing on, the expectation of increased commitment and skill development. Like, we don't always have to at 7 be focusing on trying to be the very best in that sport. Like, it's really starting to turn people away.
Definitely. And you think of a family that has, again, multiple children who have the same, commitments with each child and trying to try to get them everywhere. And it becomes, a real kind of almost negative experience. And I think I'm a big multi-sport proponent, of course. And I've done a little, basketball was my thing. And Ruth says, like, often injuries happen, and that's where injuries tend to take place, is that overcommitment and over, 3 to 4 sessions of really competitive training or whatever it may be. But lost my train of thought. But that whole competition, that word is it. Like, we have to get better and get better to be the best to compete. So when you take away that competition, and kind of, that's where girls want to be successful. Yes, I mean, I'm a pretty competitive individual, but we always had fun. And I think for this purpose, for this workshop too, I mean, the girls and young female athletes trying hard and having fun outweigh winning or having that competition. But I agree that I'm glad my kids are now, almost 20 and 22, but to keep up with the Joneses, it seems, is the challenge these days is, everybody's, going 4 or 5 times a week to ice times and or games and or, whatever it may be, individual sport. And I don't discount like dance class or ice skating or any of those other individual competitive sports, but it becomes a little bit too much from Mike. Mike, I can't quite read everything that you're saying on my phone, so maybe Vanessa can help me out there.
Yeah, it just says a lot of athletes drive for competition and train hard, resulting in overtraining instead of enjoying it for the fun and multi-sport opportunities.
Right. Big multi-sport proponent, but where does that come from? Does that come from parents? Does that come from coaches? Where does it come from, everyone?
I think sometimes it comes from the organization. So I'm just kind of texting my friends who have young girls, and they're saying, you know, Kaden loves figure skating, but not necessarily 3 times a week.
Right.
But if you want to be involved in it, that's how it's set up.
Program design, yes, Valerie. Yeah, it comes from parents. Najim, thank you. Certainly it can come from, you know, the family circle, but also like my experiences in Charlottetown, it would have been to, you know, be a little bit more competitive with other areas. Like, so we wanted to, you know, we wanted to beat Montague, or we wanted to beat, if we were working at the university level, we wanted to beat our Dalhousie counterpart. So there was a competitive aspect to things as you get a little bit older. But for this, you know, 6 to 17-year-old age group, fun is key. I missed up that last thing that somebody just sent in the chat there.
So Mike says in 2 separate messages, some parents will make athletes do extra outside of training sessions, and then some coaches are extremely overzealous, and it could be a mixed bag.
Right. I have 2 nieces that are quite talented, and they live in Nova Scotia, and they're in the Whitecap training. My younger niece is in the Whitecaps training, soccer training academy, and she does have a 3-day-a-week, hour-and-a-half physical. It's a fitness online fitness program that she has to do, but she's also involved in her Nova Scotia rec league and the rep league there, and they do another 3 days. So, you know, she's supposed to be doing 6 days a week for 2 different organizations, although it is the same sport. So I think we have a lot of work to do, you know, with respect to if they are very competitive and get up to a level where they're working at a higher level. But she's not having fun. Like, I just talked to my sister on the weekend, and we were talking about it, and she is spent. She's exhausted. She's COVID tired. She's physically tired. She's, you know, she's not having fun anymore. And they were at a point where they were saying they were going to have to give definitely one of each of the sessions up for the Whitecap and the local Nova Scotia rec team that she plays on, for sure. Any other local experience, anybody that has either children involved themselves and or coaches and or is involved in organizations that have seen some of this overtraining and leading to either burnout, injuries? I mean, we see it probably for the most part, but anyone with a personal experience they want to share? Chat is good since there's so many. I'll share one of mine. Well, actually, it's actually when my kids were growing up, and their dad was a hockey coach, and he coached at the high level, university level for years, and he wanted them to be great skaters and hockey players. And we went to Can Skate one day when they were about 5 and 7, and that was the first and only time they went to Can Skate because they didn't have fun, and it was really not a positive experience for them. So we really only had one experience with skating, in Can Skate training, and they have now become indoor sport girls and enjoy the basketball court, much to their mother's, pride. That I'm very happy that they're and they're no longer competitive, but they competed in high school and junior high, and I coached them both, which is another whole world in itself, coaching your own children, but we always had fun. We always made practices and games and had opportunities to make sure everybody was included outside of practice. You know, there were times we got together for a pizza and all that sort of stuff. So it's definitely a big part of why that social inclusion and that social part of the game or the physical activity and the sport that girls are, it's important for them to have. So you want to move into how can we kind of help design some of these programs or ways that we can include or keep these young female athletes in sport and or being active. So we're going to talk about just key program considerations here as we're moving on. And one of the biggest things I talk about is consulting, and consulting as many different people and organizations that you can, getting even their girls' own perceptions, their own experiences. And, you know, we want to build supportive environments, we want to foster fun, and we want to prevent injury so that they will keep coming back. So you want to find out what some of the experiences are currently for these young females that are either leaving or considering leaving sport and physical activity. And then what are we going to do? What is essential for us to do to prevent them from leaving? And what actually what it says here, what promising practices currently exist. So consult. And some of you may be doing this already, looking at, you know, your own staff, whether it's an organization, a volunteer organization, you know, the parents or that may be volunteering with, although that's always a challenging thing too, but staff in your organization, your own community, maybe your you know, beyond just your community as well. Participants, they're going to give you the full scope of their experience. And other organizations that are doing similar things, environmental scans. I always like to, because in Charlottetown, it's a smaller community, I like to do environmental scans of other very relatively, you know, the same kind of smaller community. When I go and I try to find out what other universities are doing in the area, I stick to St. FX and to Acadia, because those smaller community, you know, the university is a little bit more of a central piece of the community. So looking at similar organizations. Anybody else have other additions to add there? In the chat? Make sure, Vanessa, I've got everything. Anyone? Do you want to help? We'll go to the next one. We'll go to the next slide. So building supportive environments is key, obviously. So we want to have the physical environment safe. We want to have the social environment safe. And they, obviously, those two things coming together will provide more physical and mental engagement. And I'm just going to kind of make sure that, like, this is this part, that safe environments. I want to read this so I don't get it right. It says, when considering girls' key motivations to participation, creating a social and emotionally safe space for your participants and staff have to be a priority. And somebody mentioned bullying, you know, there, and, you know, there are cliques, and unfortunately, you know, in certain teams and in certain environments, there are going to be those sort of things. But as coaches and as leaders or mentors, if you're involved, it's really important to be very aware of kind of nonverbal communication that's going on, some of the things that you may notice, that some maybe athletes are being left out, or some participants are being left out kind of repeatedly and or every once in a while. And it says also here that the safe environment's not limited to physical space and emergency procedures. 3 factors are the physical environment, social environment, and the physical and mental engagement are all interrelated. So those 3 pieces have an integral part of how we create a really safe environment for young female athletes and young female participants. So let's see, this is really interesting. The next piece of this is that what are the differences between boys and girls and their supportive environments when you look at the social acceptance. So move into the next slide. Girls are much more apt to stay in sports, stay in the activity if they are socially accepted first, and they're motivated by social acceptance, whereas boys are much more motivated to perform with effort. And you can see that social acceptance and then effort and performance and include in positive sport experience. But boys are much more motivated by effort and kind of winning and performance. And they're kind of relatively, if they're much more talented and athletic and achieve more and are successful in their sport, that gives them a higher view in their peer group, whereas girls rely much more on social acceptance than effort to put themselves in that view of being successful in their peer group. Vanessa, you might have a little bit more to add here.
Yeah, I think so. This table here comes from a resource that came out in February of 2020, and I'll put a link to that in the chat as well. Oh, did I just stop sharing screen? Yes,
No,
I did.
but I'm here.
Oops, okay. Sorry, you should be able to see my screen now. I'll put a link to this resource in the chat in a moment. But yeah, I think the comparison is really important to have. So in understanding that before you're going to get the effort from girls, they need to feel socially supported so that, you know, a mistake doesn't jeopardize how they're perceived by their friends or how they believe they'll be perceived by their friends. But, you know, what's good for one is good for all. And if anybody here has coached boys, you know that not performing or, you know, they're motivated to perform so they get social standing, but if they aren't one of the stronger performers in the group, then they're more susceptible for bullying. So if we can put social acceptance at the center of everything that we do, it will benefit everyone. We just know that it will increase engagement in girls.
Excellent. One of the things we can do is to make sure to build that. So how can we offer these supportive environments? Well, what we want to encourage, you know, girls to come in to make sure that our environment is safe and welcoming. We encourage girls to value and to the value of staying in sport, but also to value sport and physical activity. We really want to provide that positive experience and a lasting social connection. And that's, you know, I kind of go back to some of my high school, you know, 16, 17, or some of those social connections with my teammates. That's what's kept me, you know, and I'm still in contact with them. And those were really important social connections for me and friendships for me. We need to, and this is a really important one. We have to expose girls to their, you know, really strong and powerful female role models and role models such as, you know, just coaches, but other athletes in their field. You know, I was watching the bylines of the news this morning, and there was the first female ref of the Super Bowl yesterday. Does anybody know her name? First time ever female ref in the Super Bowl, in Super Bowl history. Her name was Sarah Thomas. Sarah Thomas. And actually it was a couple times this week that I saw a couple of other females getting back into the reffing game. I would love to ref basketball, but I'm afraid I would be a terrible referee. I'm a little bit verbose and I can't quite control all of that emotion that I need to as a referee. But I do believe in the power of the role model, whether it be female coaches in particular. And that's a whole other challenge, is to encourage more female coaches and assistant coaches and anybody that's taking on those leadership roles. And that's part of what Canadian Women in Sport is also about. And anyone have anything else to add about building those? Stephanie can't elbow. Is that Lynn Boudreau? Yeah, I can't use my sharp elbows. I can only use a whistle. And the last one there, let's just go back to the slide, is empower girls to strive for full and equal position in their sport and society. And I see a lot in, and some of you again can share, like Gemma, I know you're there being part of, being the CEO of Sport PEI, but your counterparts throughout the rest of the country, how is, that divided up in leadership between genders and for me, I work in the sport and athletics and recreation department at university, and in varsity sport in particular, athletics directors. There's only 2 female athletic directors, and UPEI having 1 of those 2. So there's certainly, slowly, yeah, and they're mostly male EDs as well, Gemma, for your sport counterparts, your provincial sport counterparts. So I think it's really important that we need to continue certainly the discussion and the conversation about role models and other women and other female mentors being in the same roles that we want these young female athletes to see, or to maybe eventually they want to be there. So ways that we can showcase role models and leaders, always recognize the role models we have in our lives currently. I mean, I always see Heather Moyse out there on social media. She's very vocal. It's great to see her. We watch, discuss, and celebrate female athletes, and that's one of the things I just said about Sarah Thomas being one of the actual, only female refs ever, first female ref in the Super Bowl history, to call them out, to celebrate them and make sure that they're acknowledged for their accomplishments. You invite women coaches rather, mentors and communities leaders in to discuss, to consult, to showcase, to speak. And I always say, it says here, reference a name or a drill after an athlete or team. So everyone knows our lovely Canadian role model, Christine Sinclair. So one of the things I remember somebody saying about basketball, for example, is to be aware of your language. And I was a center, or I was a post player or a center, and we'd say, the bigs are over there practicing a drill, and I want the guards over here. So being aware of your language too, that what we talk about in how we either coach or speak to female athletes, that can play a big part of their comfort zone and a welcome environment. So let's move on to how we can foster fun. Girls want to have fun with friends. They like to have others that have similar Papa women in sport and rec. Yeah. Say that again, Vanessa. I can't read it all.
Just asking some people to pop some local role models in the chat.
Excellent.
You can feel free to continue as those roll in, and we can check them out.
So girls define fun as having fun with others, and they're having a great team dynamics or positive group dynamics. They rely, or they put a lot of positive spin on having fun if they try hard, and if they are acknowledged for trying hard, and again, positive coaching, a lot of reinforcement, whether it be, however type of reinforcement that can be. My boss, Gemma. That's nice, Lynn. I'd say that. I'd say you're up there too. Lynn-Ann's up there, but Lynn Boudreau is up there, positive role model. I like Alana. Everyone knows Alana Taylor, who is Megan Ferguson. Lynn is too, for sure. Are there any female coaches out there? And does all of this apply directly? And you can see it. Kathy O'Rourke, Heather, yeah, Heather Moyse. Thanks, Gemma. Suzanne Burt up there. Ms. Miller was my role model. continue on. So continue adding those to the chat, everyone. So fostering fun. What's kind of the definition of positive team dynamics? So girls want to be accepted for sure. I've moved to that next slide. Sorry, Vanessa. So they want to have emotional safety, emotional security. It's a supportive learning environment, which kind of encourages that effort first. And if you fail, it's okay, but trying hard is the most important. And it gives them an opportunity to build friendships. Ruth Stavard in there, good, Valerie, and build on healthy relationships, either with other teammates or coaches and mentors. And they want to feel accepted. They want to feel that if they're going to try something new, they will be able to be confident or be successful in trying those new activities. And nobody's going to offer any negative kind of influence on their attempts to try. Rebecca Russell. So leaders, if you're looking for ways that you can really build on positive team dynamics, so you have to kind of integrate this social unstructured time for your teams to, or your athletes to be able to build on those healthy relationships. And so I always say those pizza parties. I used to finish our basketball practice with games, and everybody would end with some laughter, some positive feelings. And it says here too, to provide opportunities for participants to highlight other successes and efforts. So, who was the the best passer of the day, or who was the greatest motivator today for everybody during practice. I mean, you may want to call it those types of things, and everyone give a clap. However, you can apply those to your own teams or own experiences with however you're dealing with young female athletes. So moving on to trying hard. So what can we do to encourage girls to try hard? Is we want them obviously participating, but we want to have sport programming, quality sport programming. We want to learn new skills. We want to improve their skills through intentional skill building, and they want to compete. Girls do want to compete, but we have to make sure that these fundamental movement skills are key. And I have my own. I know there's some research out there on long-term development and all that sort of stuff, but I just think the last. Oh yeah, sorry. Go ahead, Vanessa. Key to highlight those. I see you're just.
I can't help myself.
Yeah,
I'm in the chat and I can't help myself. I apologize. Just when you gave a really great example of the shout outs that teammates can give, and I love that you touched on, who's the best motivator, and highlighting the life skills and the values that girls get from sport, not just like who scored the most. So I think that's great.
Well, I got to tell you a little story, and this is my own story. And I played competitive university basketball, but my first year I warmed the bench, right? And I had there was only one other first year player with me. She was actually my best friend. So she and I warmed the bench. She carried the first aid kit and I carried the balls. So it was like, basically that was our role. And, you get tired of it. But I remember the greatest coach of all time. He was the coach of our team that year. And he says, we aren't successful without you. We aren't successful. Everybody's got their role, and your role is to carry the balls. If we don't have the balls, we don't play basketball. So it's really important that everybody has their, whatever the role may be, that they're valued, right? So it may be the motivator. Eventually I played a little bit more, but I recognize that. And I said, you know what? It's true. And it is, even though I want to play more and I want to do more, I've got to prove my worth. I got to, continue to build my skills. But it made me feel more a part of the team, right? I was an important part of the team. And they also needed me to practice to get better. So as a whole, we were more successful. So I think defining roles and defining, the importance of those roles for young female athletes in particular, if they're not as skilled, or if they're not starters, or however it may be, whatever their role is, it's important to let them know. Because sometimes their expectations are way beyond what what you think, or what as a coach, or as a a leader in an organization. So we have to, so that fundamental movement skills, the long-term student athlete development, I don't think there's enough I don't think there's enough free time. I think a lot of the imperative fundamental movement skills that we had as 25, 30 years ago on playgrounds after school, maybe have become, it's been less time in free play time, and some of those fundamental movement skills. So that's what I think sometimes leads to injuries early, is these fundamental movement patterns are not really fully mastered or practiced before moving on to some of the higher level stuff. We want developmentally appropriate activities that are focused on the group, and then create environment that encourage risk taking and setting goals. So it's important for girls to encourage each other, but also definitely we do want to take risks, and that's what life is, and that's what sport is, and be able to set goals for themselves. Sorry, Mike, I missed what that question was.
I think we'll save that question for the question period in 5 minutes. It's a really good one. I just think we could talk about it. I think we could really get into it. So I'm gonna keep that one, Mike, and then we'll address it later. Okay, great.
Thank you. Great. So let's move on to the next slide. Positive coaching. So the girls want to feel valued by their leader, they're valued by their coach and included. They want to make new friends, and they want to be empowered to stay in sport. Or we actually, as coaches or mentors, want to empower these girls. So, including everyone's voice, not just the loud mouths of the group. There's always, there are people who are more comfortable in speaking out, but encouraging everyone to participate and give their opinions or offer something is important. Patience and encouragement as a leader, as a coach, we need to definitely include that, and be much more of a role model and lead by example is key as well. So positive coaching and kind of recruiting those positive coaches is a tough thing to do, but definitely part of the success for keeping girls involved. Let's move on to preventing injury. There are 3 types of kind of injury. Obviously, mechanical, result either impact, rolling an ankle. There could be, again, those 4 practices a week, overuse, without doing a kind of a multi-sport or multi-action plan for the body, or poor technical execution, which would go back to those fundamental movement patterns and fundamental skills. There's energetic injury, which could be consistent with maybe just not having enough fuel, and the body not working to its full capacity. But there's psychosocial injury is when the bullying might happen, or again, Molly, coming back to the body image, somebody that doesn't feel that they look the part, right, of what a gymnast might look like, or a female hockey player might look like. So, and Vanessa, you're coming on here, and do you want to add something there to that?
Sorry, I'm good. I'm going to share my screen in a moment.
Okay. So that emotional kind of psychosocial injury is a big part of that lack of participation or leaving sport for girls, and not being kind of equally given the opportunities to participate, or not being accepted by her teammates and or peers within that same group. Good stuff. How can we take preventative measures? So there is a Safe Sport, the E module. Vanessa, any other information on additional workshops or virtual information? Vanessa is certainly available for that, for contact. We need to definitely work at and this, I think this is happening in schools with phys ed teachers and stuff like that, but fundamental movement skills, we need to keep fundamental movement skills in the forefront to be able to prevent actual physical injury. And we need to talk about proper fueling. We need to talk about how you're going to, be able to have the energy to compete and or continue, with practices at certain times of the day. I always think 24 hours out, I know what I have to do tomorrow. How am I going to fuel my body today to be able to perform tomorrow? And then really keeping an eye out for, those subtle social cues or those interaction cues, nonverbal cues or lack of them that may develop with some teammates and or groups that are kind of working in the same physical activity or sport, and really try to encourage positive team dynamics. Anybody else have anything to add in addition to be able to give these girls or give young female athletes a much more positive experience? Oh, a handbook for parents. Yes, Ruth. What I have found in my own experience is some of the young athletes that I've coached or had a chance to work with, that many of the parents that I have had either a challenge communicating with and or they've not been happy with my approach to the sport and or their athlete or daughter is because they have themselves not participated in sport at all at any point in their lives. So I think for me personally, the experience of having parents who have competed in sport and or were an athlete and or were a coach and or anywhere else having experience in sport and physical activity would have a greater, for the most part, understanding and or acceptance of some of the things that you would do. I don't know if anybody else out there has an opposing view. But again, some of the girls that I have had my experiences with as athletes, their parents, any challenges that I had, their parents were not athletic themselves or involved in sport and physical activity. Anyone want to share anything there on their experiences as coaches and or leaders?
I'll just jump in. Lynn shared that she got a lot out of keeping girls in sport, which is an E module that we worked with in collaboration with Respect Group and Canadian Tire Jumpstart. So I have the link there. That is that's a paid opportunity. I believe it's $17 to participate. It takes less than 2 hours, but you can break it up over several sittings. And a lot of the information does relate to what we've discussed today as well.
That's awesome. Thanks, Lynn. So we do have this activity, this little bit of a scenario to finish us off, for the day. And the activity on the slide is, let's just read through this, and Vanessa, you can offer anything if I miss anything. So you're a program leader and you're kind of going towards the end of your last program cycle. You notice the attendance of the girls in your co-ed rec program has drastically decreased or reduced. And when you ask one of the participants why fewer girls were attending, she's explaining that the boys don't pass. And a number of the girls were bullying each other at school. So the majority of the girls register again for the upcoming program cycle. And so how are you going to actively plan and actively make a few changes for the next program cycle, knowing this information and trying to prevent that drop off of girls in the program? Vanessa, how long do you want? A couple minutes or a minute?
This group has been really active in the chat, and I loved hearing from people who unmuted themselves. So I just put in the chat that we should, go about it that way and just work together. And we can discuss this for a few minutes and then move on to the question period.
Excellent. Introduce small team drills. Multi-sport. What sports? Maybe choose a couple of different sports.
I am Mike McDonald from Charlottetown. They made the comment about futsal for people who are playing soccer. So for those that don't know, it's just it's a lot more footwork and like ability focused rather than gameplay. The ball is more weighted, it's smaller, and there's less players. So it works on players using more like one-on-one skills and footwork to actually get the points rather than playing the field.
Just kicking it and going. I've never played futsal. I've seen it in action, but I've never played directly. Change the rules. So pass has to be, if you're a boy, it has to go to a girl. If you're a girl, it has to go to a boy. All good answers. 2 separate programs. I have seen 2 separate programs here. A couple of different people have said separate the groups.
I think that's one of the most common strategies that you see, and there definitely is like you do create a more equitable environment when you create girls-only spaces, especially in terms of culture, as some girls can't participate in sport in front of boys. I would say, that's not always going to be the case, and you're not necessarily going to have the resources to run 2 separate programs. And you might also be creating an environment where someone who is gender non-binary is then, forced to make a decision. And the beauty of an all-gender program or a co-ed program means that anyone can participate. And if anyone has any suggestions here for how you might tackle the bullying taking place outside of school, we can shift to that aspect of the scenario as well.
That's kind of what I was addressing in my comment with the getting people to play with smaller team drills, because then you're getting players to interact with each other one-on-one, and they have to work together in a cooperative fashion to actually achieve something. So that could end up limiting their poor interactions outside of that. But I can also see how it could be an exacerbating factor as well.
No, I didn't catch that at first. So thanks for re-explaining that, Mike. And definitely any activities that focus on collaboration will create learning opportunities for you to correct negative behavior and hopefully set a culture and the positive team dynamics like Stephanie was speaking about.
Yeah.
So just calling it out when you see it too.
Calling it out, yep. And then I mean, if you're a program leader and you're not at the school when you do find out the information, maybe there's a connection you can make to the school, or, find more information out about what is happening during the activities in the school day. Are they in the same class? Are they also, whatever other information you can find out might be helpful as well. Anyone else to add a little bit more? It is now almost time to reflect. It is time to reflect. So let's reflect. So you'll see, there's a lot of information today. It was good. Some of it you knew and know, and some of it maybe you didn't, and learning a little bit more. So if you think about how can you now recognize some of the barriers that some of the girls face, and what can you do to change today, whatever your role may be. Consider the influence of girls' socialization and intersecting identities on how they learn and participate in program development. How easy is it for a certain group of girls to either get to their training, or can that family afford it? Does that person need a drive to does that person need to access funding that may assist them in participating in, the registration fees and that sort of thing. So we need to understand all of the factors that may be limiting girls' participation in sport. Need to be an advocate for equity in girls and for girls in physical activity. And we really need to, this is another kind of baby of mine, is to create and promote pathways for girls to stay active and to stay physically active and move their bodies, and not necessarily because they want to look good, right? And coming back to Molly's body image and the reason that people want to work out or be active is so that their bodies can perform, in many ways and carry them through life, without injury and that sort of thing, versus wanting to have, hourglass figure and or whatever it may be. So we need to really focus on the reasons and tell our girls why they should be active and stay moving. Anything to add there, Vanessa? Anyone else find that they got a little more to add to this after just hearing or seeing some of this information? Can think about that.
All good on my end. I'll just let everybody know that the post-workshop evaluation is in the chat. I know that sometimes you're double booked or you have something that starts right as something ends. So I wanted to include that before we go into Q&A.
So let's do a little bit of Q&A. I mean, this is maybe more for Vanessa than me, and I have to apologize. So in the storm of everything, I may have felt like I was a little bit off kilter today because all of my information is at my office regarding the workshop today. So I did kind of make my way through this. Thank you, Vanessa, for your help and direction along the way. But any questions for Vanessa and or myself? Did you find it helpful? Did you find it that there was some information that you went, oh yes, and or I'm going to use that, and or I'm going to take that back to my coach or my, whatever it may be, and give you, and even just reflecting on how you yourselves, whatever your role may be, how you can start promoting some of this information. So if that
Hi,
is...
Stephanie and Vanessa, it's Molly here.
Hi, Molly.
Hello. I was just kind of thinking back to near the beginning of the presentation when you were talking about the limitations and difficulties that women and girls have when going into sport. In terms of the financial limitations, is that something that also applies to men and boys, or is that something specifically, we can target towards women and girls, especially with intersecting identities? Like, how do we target that group specifically?
Target the girls with respect to like program registration fees or stuff like that.
Yeah, the financial limitations, because those could also apply to, all genders and bodies and abilities. So, I'm just curious as to how you can target that specifically.
More to those that again, talking about Indigenous populations that live on reserves that are further out of town. They're a little bit more rural and they may not have the opportunity to travel to. I think for most families, maybe there is one or two children and they have a boy and a girl, and are they both equally funded to do whatever they want to do? Is there the capacity for that family to allow each of their children to equally participate in sport and or what it is that they want to do? Who would be, if there was only enough funds for one, who would be the one? I mean, these are just all questions. Definitely the funding part may be applied to both genders, but for girls in particular, maybe there would be more capability of having funds for specifically for young female athletes. And Gemma just mentioned that kids sport is there for those families that are having challenging times meeting the financial needs of sport and equipment and or registration fees. But
yeah,
definitely,
awesome. That really helps a lot clarify. Thank you very much.
sure.
I can also share an anecdote from like a policy or organization standpoint. I pre-COVID coached at a facility for socioeconomically disadvantaged youth. So all of our programming is free. And we're actually the main floor that is attached to 4 community housing towers in downtown Toronto. And so girls basketball program for almost a year in the 11 to 14 age group when I first started working there was myself and one girl. And I was afforded an entire court to work with one girl, and the organization was committed to growing that program. And now 2.5 years later, we have 14 girls, which is great. But if another organization didn't make that commitment, then you likely would have seen the program close after one cycle because you only have one girl and you're paying for one coach. There are other kids who want to use the court, but it was really important for them to put their money where their mouth was. And not everybody is able to do that because you might have stakeholder commitments and you have to engage a certain number of people. But that's just another perspective for, okay, so now there are fewer programs for girls because some aren't well attended. And so there's the cost of traveling outside of your community to do a program. So it's really how it all folds in together and through intersectionality.
And I actually just even levels of programming, like we try to, like in a lot of the high schools and junior highs now, there are, really a much more competitive team, let's say a AAA, and then there's a AA, and that's how we kind of designate our teams here. But I always, the AAAs and the AAs would always have their first choice of gym time, because they were the competitive team for the school, and so they would always get the immediate after school practice times. But I coached an A team, which was really based on a lot, still slightly competitive, but also very participatory. Would take kids that were capable in the sport and encourage them to stay involved and play and still have fun. But we would get the practice times at 7 p.m. and parents would be off right after work, and the kids, they live a little bit further out of town, and they wouldn't be able to come in and make practice because their parents weren't going to drive back in. Or there's a lot of that kind of equity issues with respect to levels as well of some competitive leagues and or groups and organizations. So I found that was a barrier when I personally was coaching, is the time of day and or those prime times where people could. And Ruth is saying something newcomers must, and that's all I see.
The rest of the statement there is newcomers must really have a hard time getting into sport and recreation.
Be interesting to see what information is out there about our newcomers population and whether that's an issue. And I'm sure information out there we could find.
I'm really pleased that was mentioned, and I see now that we're over time, so I appreciate anybody who's stuck around, and if you could please fill out that post evaluation, that would be great. But Canadian Women in Sport, we're going to be launching a document in early March that is comes on the heels of a 3-year program in partnership with organizations across Canada that we're working with newcomer women and girls in a sport capacity. So I'll be sure to share that with this network once it's live. But if you just keep your eyes on our website for the next little while, I'm sure you will come across it.
Thanks, everyone. And again, yes, apologies for my a little bit back and forth, but I thank Vanessa 100% for carrying me on that one, and everybody else for participating. We can all take something away from this. Our work has been successful. Thank you.
Likewise, I want to give a big shout out to CPRA, REC PEI, and Sport Canada for funding this initiative. Thank you to everyone who was here today. You were super interactive and really made it a great experience for myself. And yeah, please complete the evaluation. You'll receive a follow-up email from me, which will include the link as well as a recording to this session and a number of the resources mentioned throughout. And have a great rest of your week. Stay safe and be in touch, please.
Thanks, everyone.